trafficking has become this huge, very well-funded campaign, and it is become this very popular cause in which to support, and there's a lot of money behind it, and what the commercials and a lot of the groups that have religious intentions that are religiously based, so therefore are not going to they're going to have a sort of savior attitude, like the Salvation Army, with the name Salvation Army, backs a lot of media campaigns that really squish prostitution and trafficking together. So what sex workers who advocate for their rights are really trying to get people to see is that not all sex work is trafficking. So not every woman who's come overseas was forced to be here, is bound and gagged, is whipped, is feels like every single person that she sleeps with for money is raped. Not everybody feels that way. Not every sex worker, not everybody who exchanges sex for money feels degraded and raped every time we have sex for money.
I guess it was in around 78, I started 77, 78. I've been working internationally on these issues and started working on the issues around trafficking in 1995, when we realized that the trafficking issue was taking center stage, in Europe particularly, after the fall of the Eastern Bloc, and a lot of human rights activists understood that there was a lot of discomfort in Europe with immigration, and that this would then be a priority on the agenda. And the human rights activists I worked with were most concerned about women's well-being and started an organization to help women who were trafficked. And they were working at a human rights perspective. Well, at the same time, there were those who had had a long-time moral agenda around abolishing prostitution and saw the trafficking framework and the trafficking issue as a way to then warn people against prostitution. That indeed, quite often, they often would say that all prostitution is trafficking, that there is no such thing as consent. So there were two perspectives on anti-trafficking that have been in a sort of a war around the globe. And for the UN protocol on trafficking, they were fighting out at the UN, and there was a sort of a compromise. Now, I guess you can imagine that in the United States, certainly the prohibitionist, moralist perspective predominates. In fact, most people in the United States that I talk to don't even know that there is a dualistic approach, that there are many who see the repressive strategy around trafficking as counterproductive.
So I've really been fascinated with the trafficking hysteria as it relates to people, specifically women of Asian descent. So I wrote a short little essay on it that is called "The Control of Representations and Policies Regarding the Bodies of Asian Female Sex Workers." And particularly in San Francisco, where there is a huge Asian American population and a very large Asian migrant population, and a history specifically of Chinese prostitution, being with the Chinese immigration that started there during the gold rush days. So the prostitutes were right there beside the miners who were basically laying the foundations of the railroad and building the, the base of what you see as California and, the transnational railroad. So during November of '08, I was working on Proposition K, which was a proposition in San Francisco to decriminalize prostitution. And during that whole part of legislation that we were trying to pass in San Francisco only, there was a lot of, the opposition then would put out these flyers and say, if you decriminalize prostitution, it will be a green light to the pimps. It'll be a green light to the traffickers. And this is a mailer that they had. When this mailer, it's like, sad Asian girl. Human trafficking is a serious problem in San Francisco. Last year alone, the San Francisco Chronicle reported that 17 massage parlors were closed, suspected of forcing immigrant Asian women into sex work. So it's like, I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's that, is being mailed, and that's the type of billboard that you would see. And for me, being a sex worker of Asian descent, it's just like worming inside my own body to just not understand how these other activists who are all about, liberating and upholding people of color rights don't see that the racism that exists in this type of, campaign, to me, is is just glaring, but because it has to do with sex work, it's okay to talk about just race, but when we get more complex with sex or queerness, then it's something that people are wishy-washy about. It's not like you're going to get as much of a march, a band of people following you. So I specifically like try to focus like on how this affects women of Asian descent, and you could go to my website and read that, but it's sort of like, it's like basically in a nutshell, like wake up people, you know, like we just like really understood how Chinese prostitutes were also workers just like the gold miners, and then stopped to like not try to, you know, like they were all sort of given the same discrimination, if not more. And if you start to just, it starts with the simplistic like thought, like is sex work, and can I really value people who are working and honor that they're working hard to get, you know, the same dreams that I might want to get or my parents might want to get. Can I, once I start with that foundation, then where does my acceptance and where does my stigma start to become unpacked? The culminating part of my theory on Asian sex worker discrimination happened upon getting the opportunity to meet Asian sex workers in their home countries. I saw photos and talked to other activists who were on the front lines struggling to create a resistance to their own country and US policies that endanger the lives of prostitution in the name of stopping trafficking. It wasn't until I met and heard stories of Cambodians, Malaysians, Indians, Taiwanese, and Thai sex workers struggling against the same xenophobia, racism, and patriarchal rescue and rehab missions that I fully understood the trafficking hysteria myths. Buenas tardes, my name is Mariko Passion. I'm reporting from the International AIDS Conference in Mexico City in 2008. I'm going to talk about a display that I've installed here. We are working in collaboration with Asian Pacific Network of Sex Workers and also Sex Workers Outreach Project. And this is the art installation that we decided to create awareness around the hypocrisy in the U.S. trafficking laws. Right now, there's a bunch of money being spent on stopping trafficking both in the U.S. and globally, which is actually hurting sex workers. And in Cambodia, people are being detained who may have been hanging out in the street in front of massage parlors and stuff like that, so that they can prove that they're doing something to stop this trafficking problem. And we printed the pages. This is a U.S. document about sort of how sex slavery is still a problem, but really the truth is that there are many migrant sex workers who have chosen to migrate to the U.S. who are not trafficked, and the actual percentage of trafficked victims is a lot lower than is being published in propaganda. So it's an interactive exhibition. People can go in.
I'm working with sex workers to support sex workers that focus on the advocate for the rights of sex workers, the rights to work, the right to profession and protections in Cambodia. This is some of the sex workers, not all, but some of representatives of the Cambodian sex workers came together to pray in front of the Angkor Wat Temple, which is the World Heritage, and to demand for to stop the anti-trafficking law that criminalize sex workers in Cambodia, that the Cambodian government has been passed. And this is because sex workers, not all sex workers can come to the AIDS conference, and they just sign some petition and thumbprint to say that the policy of the USAID should be stopped because of the US government that tried to put the pressure on the Cambodian government to pass the new anti-trafficking law, and that makes number of sex workers more vulnerable and mistreated and abused, you know, like such as rape, and they cannot work, and number of process were cracked down, and they cannot run the business as before. The solution that the US government or international organization UN thinks this is the way to combat trafficking, human trafficking, but sex workers say this is to make more people vulnerable and trapped under the trafficking issue, because sex workers are part of the solution. They know who have been trafficked, they know who have been working voluntarily at the brothels, anywhere. So they are a good partners. Without working with them, you can't address the issue of trafficking and violence and abuses.